To subscribe to our channel for more English story. Mira sat at her desk, staring blankly at her English workbook. The words on the page swam before her eyes. Complicated, intelligent, ambitious. They all felt like strangers, unfamiliar and stubborn. She sighed, her frustration bubbling over as she slammed the book shut. How am I supposed to remember all these words? She muttered, tapping her pencil against her notebook. The English language competition was only 3 weeks away, and Mira felt completely unprepared. She had signed up with big dreams of winning. But now, even simple tasks like learning vocabulary felt impossible. Mira! Her grandmother's voice called from the kitchen. Lunch is ready. Dragging her feet, Mira joined her grandmother at the dining table. Her grandmother, a retired language teacher, had always been Myra's biggest supporter. With her kind smile and warm eyes, she could make even the toughest problems seem smaller. You look upset, her grandmother said, setting a bowl of soup in front of her. What's wrong, dear? Mira sighed again. It's this competition. I can't remember any of the English words I'm trying to learn. I keep forgetting them right after I read them. It's like my brain refuses to cooperate. Her grandmother chuckled softly. Ah, I see. You're trying to memorize words the hard way, aren't you? Just reading and rereading them? Yes, Mira admitted. Isn't that how everyone does it? Her grandmother shook her head. Not quite. When I was a teacher, I always told my students that remembering words isn't about cramming them into your brain. It's about making them come alive. Come alive? Mira asked, raising an eyebrow. What does that mean? Her grandmother smiled mysteriously. Let me show you. After lunch, her grandmother led Mira to the living room, where she pulled out an old box from the cabinet. Inside were flashcards, small drawings, and handwritten notes. This, her grandmother said, holding up a flashcard with the word curious written on it, is one of the ways I taught my students. Look at the picture on the back. Mira flipped the card over and saw a sketch of a cat peeking into a box. Below it, the word curious was written again with a simple sentence. The curious cat looked inside the box. Her grandmother explained, by connecting the word to a picture and a sentence, your brain creates a story. That story makes the word easier to remember. Myra's eyes widened. That's actually really smart. Her grandmother smiled. Shall we try making a few of these for the words you're learning? Step 1. Turning words into stories. Mira decided to start with the word complicated. She wrote it on a flashcard and turned to her grandmother. How do I make a story for this one? Think about something that feels complicated to you. Her grandmother suggested. For example, solving a big puzzle or assembling a piece of furniture. Mira thought for a moment and drew a picture of herself sitting in front of a 1,000 piece puzzle, looking confused. Then, she wrote. The puzzle was so complicated that Mira needed help to finish it. When she read the sentence aloud, she laughed. This actually makes sense. I can see the word in my head now. Her grandmother nodded. Exactly. Your brain loves stories and pictures. The more you use them, the easier it gets. Step 2. Word associations. The next day, Mira tackled the word ambitious. She found it hard to remember because it didn't seem connected to anything familiar. Grandma, what do I do if a word feels random? She asked. Make an association. Her grandmother replied. Think of something or someone that reminds you of the word. For ambitious, who do you know that has big dreams and works hard? Mira grinned. My best friend, Lena. She wants to be a scientist and always studies late at night. Perfect, her grandmother said. Now imagine Lena holding a big trophy that says, Ambitious Scientist of the Year. Picture it in your mind. Mira closed her eyes and laughed. Got it? Lena is ambitious. Her grandmother clapped her hands. See? That's how associations work. You connect the word to something personal, and it sticks. Step 3. Using visuals and imagination. A few days later, Myra's grandmother introduced her to another technique. Using visuals and imagination to make words memorable. Let's take the word intelligent. Her grandmother said. What comes to mind when you think of this word? Maybe a person reading a big book? Mira suggested. Great. Now make it funny or unusual. The sillier, the better. What if the person reading the book is a monkey wearing glasses? Mira giggled. That's so weird, but I'll never forget it. Exactly, her grandmother said. The more creative and vivid your imagination, the easier it is to remember. Mira drew a quick sketch of the monkey on her flashcard and added the sentence. The intelligent monkey loved to read books. Step 4. Practice makes progress. With her grandmother's help, Mira spent the next week creating flashcards, drawing pictures, and coming up with funny or meaningful associations for all the words she needed to learn. She practiced them every day, repeating the stories and sentences until they felt natural. At first, it was challenging to keep up with so many new words. But Mira noticed that the more she practiced, the easier it became. Words that once felt like strangers now felt like old friends. One evening, as Mira was reviewing her flashcards, she realized something surprising. She wasn't just memorizing words anymore. She was enjoying the process. Learning English felt less like a chore and more like a game. She even started using the new words in conversations with her grandmother, who always encouraged her to keep trying. A hopeful moment. By the end of the second week, Myra's confidence had grown significantly. She could remember most of the words she had struggled with before. And her grandmother beamed with pride whenever Mira showed her progress. Grandma, Mira said one evening, holding her stack of flashcards, I think I'm starting to get it. Learning words isn't about forcing them into my head. It's about connecting with them, making them fun, personal, and alive. Her grandmother nodded, her eyes twinkling. That's exactly right. My dear, words are like seeds. If you plant them in the right soil, your imagination, your emotions, they'll grow into something beautiful. Mira felt a spark of hope in her chest. For the first time since signing up for the competition, she believed she could do it. She wasn't perfect, and there were still many words to learn, but she was on the right path. As she tucked her flashcards into her backpack, she looked at her grandmother and smiled. Thank you, Grandma. I couldn't have done this without you. Her grandmother smiled back. The journey isn't over yet, Mira, but I have no doubt you'll finish it with flying colors. Into part one, Myra's journey to mastering English vocabulary has just begun. She's made great progress, but she still has more to learn before the competition. Will she continue to grow her skills and overcome new challenges? Part 2. Mira woke up the next morning feeling a mix of excitement and nervousness. She had made so much progress in the past 2 weeks, but the English competition was only 10 days away. Despite her grandmother's encouragement, doubts still lingered in her mind. What if I forget everything when I'm on stage? Mira whispered to herself as she stared at the ceiling. Her grandmother's voice floated through the hallway. Mira, breakfast is ready. And bring those flashcards. We're trying something new today. Mira smiled. If there was one thing she had learned in this journey, it was that her grandmother always had a new idea up her sleeve. Step 5. Acting out words. At the breakfast table, her grandmother placed a small box in front of Mira. Inside were slips of paper with English words Mira had been practicing. Today, her grandmother began, we're going to act out the words. Act them out? Mira asked, raising an eyebrow. Yes. It's called physical learning. When you use your body to act out words, you engage your memory in a different way. Her grandmother explained. Pick a word from the box and try to show it without speaking. Mira reached into the box and pulled out the word exhausted. She thought for a moment, then slumped in her chair, pretending to wipe sweat off her forehead. Her grandmother laughed. Perfect. You look exhausted. Now say it in a sentence. Mira sat up and said, after running 5 miles, I felt exhausted. Excellent. Her grandmother praised. Now try another. Mira picked cheerful next. She smiled brightly, clapped her hands, and said, my friend Lena is always cheerful when she gets good grades. As they continued, Mira realized that acting out the words not only made them fun, but also helped her remember their meanings more vividly. Her grandmother explained, when your body moves, your brain creates a stronger connection to the word. It's like adding another layer of memory. Step 6. Building word families. Later that day, Mira struggled with a new batch of words. Some were similar, and she kept mixing them up, like hopeful, hopeless, and hope. Frustrated, she asked her grandmother for advice. Ah, you found word families, her grandmother said with a nod. They're tricky at first, but once you understand them, they're much easier to remember. Word families? Mira asked. Yes. Words like hopeful, hopeless, and hope are all related. They share the same root word, hope. Think of them as a family, with the root word as the parent. Myra's grandmother drew a simple chart on a piece of paper. Hope noun. A feeling of wanting something good to happen. Hopeful, adjective. Feeling positive that something good will happen. Hopeless, Adjective. Feeling like nothing good can happen. When you learn one word, try to learn its family too. Her grandmother suggested. That way, you understand the connections between them. Mira nodded and started making her own word family charts for other tricky words. It felt like solving a puzzle. And soon, she was able to group words together in her mind. Step 7. Using real-life context. As the days passed, Mira noticed that she still struggled to use some of the words and sentences. Her grandmother suggested practicing with real-life situations. Let's go to the market, her grandmother said one afternoon. We'll practice your words while we're out. At the fruit stall, her grandmother handed Mira a pear. Can you use the word ripe? Mira thought for a moment and said, This pear is ripe and ready to eat. Wonderful. Now, how about fresh? Her grandmother asked, holding up a bunch of green herbs. Mira replied, These herbs look fresh because they're green and not wilted. Throughout the trip, Mira practiced using new words to describe everything she saw: delicious, colorful, bargain, and more. By connecting the words to real-life experiences, she found it easier to recall them later. Step 8. Overcoming setbacks. Despite her progress, Mira faced setbacks too. One evening, as she reviewed her flashcards, she forgot several words she had learned earlier. Tears filled her eyes. Grandma, what if I forget everything on competition day? I feel like all my hard work is falling apart. Her grandmother placed a comforting hand on her shoulder. Mira, it's normal to forget sometimes. Learning isn't a straight path. It's full of ups and downs. What matters is that you don't give up. But I feel so frustrated, Mira admitted. Frustration is part of the process. Her grandmother said gently. Instead of getting stuck, take a break. Then try again. And remember, mistakes are how we learn. Mira took her grandmother's advice and gave herself a short break. When she returned to her flashcards, she realized that reviewing them calmly helped her recall the words more easily. Step 9. Creating a memory palace. With only 3 days left until the competition, Myra's grandmother introduced her to one final technique. The memory palace. A memory palace? Mira repeated, curious. Yes, her grandmother said. It's an ancient technique where you imagine a familiar place, like your home, and store words in different rooms. Her grandmother guided her through the process. Imagine walking through your house. In the kitchen, you might place the word delicious. Picture a plate of delicious cookies on the table. In the living room, you could store comfortable, imagining a cozy sofa. When you need to remember the words, just walk through your memory palace. Mira closed her eyes and visualized her home, placing words in each room. The process felt magical. And when she tried recalling the words later, she was surprised by how easily they came back. The day of the competition. The morning of the competition arrived, and Mira felt a mixture of nerves and excitement. As she stood backstage, she whispered to herself, I've worked hard. I can do this. When her turn came, Mira stepped onto the stage. The audience watched as she answered questions about English words, their meanings, and how to use them in sentences. She used her flashcard stories, word families, and even her memory palace to recall the words she needed. By the end of the competition, Mira felt proud of herself. Whether she won or not, she knew she had grown so much. A new confidence. Later that evening, Mira sat with her grandmother, holding the small trophy she had earned for placing second in the competition. "I didn't win first place," she said, "but I feel like I won something even bigger." Her grandmother smiled. "And what's that, my dear?" "Confidence," Mira replied. "I learned that I can overcome challenges if I keep trying. And now, I actually enjoy learning words." Her grandmother hugged her tightly. "I'm so proud of you, Mira. This is just the beginning of your journey." Myra's journey to remember words wasn't just about the competition. It was about discovering her own potential and finding joy in learning. The techniques she learned became tools she would use for a lifetime, proving that with creativity, determination, and a little help, anything is possible. A lifelong journey. As the days passed after the competition, Mira found herself continuing to practice her word learning techniques, not because she had to, but because she wanted to. She realized that learning words wasn't just about winning a competition. It was about opening doors to new ideas, stories, and opportunities. One evening, Mira sat with her grandmother and asked, "Do you think I'll ever be fluent in English?" Her grandmother smiled warmly. "Fluency isn't something that happens overnight, Mira. It's a journey, and every word you learn is a step forward. Remember, even the best speakers were once beginners." Mira nodded thoughtfully. "So, it's okay if I make mistakes along the way?" "It's more than okay," her grandmother said. "Mistakes are proof that you're learning. And with your creativity and determination, I have no doubt you'll go far." Inspiring others, a few weeks later, Mira shared her flashcards and memory palace technique with her classmates. She even started a small group where they practiced vocabulary together using the fun methods her grandmother had taught her. "I never thought learning words could be fun," one of her friends said during a session. "This is so much better than just memorizing from a list." Mira beamed. She realized that her struggles had turned into something positive, not only for herself, but for others too. It felt like she was passing on the gift of learning that her grandmother had given her. A note of encouragement to anyone who, like Mira, struggles with remembering words. It's okay to feel frustrated sometimes. Learning isn't about being perfect. It's about trying, exploring, and finding what works for you. Whether it's turning words into stories, using pictures, acting them out, or building a memory palace, there's always a way to make learning easier and more enjoyable. Just like Mira, you have the power to turn challenges into opportunities and make the process fun. Keep going. And remember that every word you learn is a step closer to achieving your goals. I'm so glad you spent this time with me. If you like the story, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe for more. Take care, and see you next time.